Hey, we're back with What About Nutrition? I'm Steve Casper. With me, Mr. Nutrition, David Gall of O'Fallon Nutrition. Find them on the web at o'fallonnutrition.com and their new store at Highway K, Mexico Road, right really on Mexico, just off of Highway K there, up by Slackers and Quiznos up to the right, kind of catty-cornered there from Texas Roadhouse. And David Gall, we were talking about the Paleo diet, which is kind of like a low-carb, but it's basically the way that human beings have eaten on this earth for the vast majority of their existence.
Sure, that's exactly right. And, you don't have to, doesn't matter if you believe in human evolution or not. I mean, we all know that there have been human beings on Earth for a while, and we didn't develop agriculture immediately. So before that, we were hunters and gatherers or practiced methods of living like pastoralism, which is very similar. And we didn't obviously have refined food. So the paleo diet, of course, drops out grains. It drops out even legumes like beans, but it keeps fruit and vegetables, meats, fish, eggs, insects, because, of course, our human ancestors would have eaten those, even though we may not, as well as lots and lots of good fats from nuts and seeds, flax seeds, coconut, almonds, cashews, macadamias. The list goes on and on. And because of the fact that you're dropping so much refined carbohydrate as well as grain, you're going to be producing lots less insulin. And as we said in the first segment, carbs drive insulin, insulin drives fat. And so if we drop our refined carbohydrates and our grains and we stick to what our human ancestors were eating, more along the lines of lower sugar fruits like berries as well as the nuts and seeds, we're not going to have that insulin that drives triglycerides up, for example, that drives inflammation. And as we've reviewed in other shows in the past, we now know that inflammation is a major component of encouraging hardening of the arteries, atherosclerotic plaque, or what we consider to be cardiovascular disease. And it's thought by a lot of the famous authors that write about the paleo diet and nutritionists, they believe that the overconsumption of grain is a big contributor to development of things like celiac disease. Currently, 1 in 133 people has celiac disease, although that statistic is thought to be dramatically underreported because most people are not tested for it. Anecdotally, in the store, we're seeing huge amounts of people that seem to be genuinely sensitive to wheat, and it's fascinating. I'm often suggesting to folks that they try not eating wheat. We had 2 or 3 people in the store yesterday with eczema-like symptoms on their skin that we suggested that they try to avoid wheat. We're seeing a lot of allergies right now because the mold count is really, really high. And if you're really susceptible to mold, that could be a red flag that one might be dealing with issues such as yeast overgrowth or candida, which we did another show on recently. So this is something to watch out for, and a paleo diet might be appropriate for somebody that's experiencing a lot of inflammation or itis kind of issues, skin issues, susceptibility to allergies, overweight. You can't be fat long term eating a paleo diet. It's just basically impossible. And I feel confident guaranteeing our listeners that there probably weren't any fat cavemen, unless some caveman was the king and everybody just brought him stuff.
You go back in the last 100 years, there are periods of time when there were very few fat people. They're a rarity. And, of course, we have an obesity problem. And we live in the state of Missouri, which is very much
one of the fatter states, but
one of them could be worse, right? But our lifestyle, and this wheat thing has got me intrigued because, whenever I go to a fast food place, because I have to or because I just don't have time for something else, I try to get the healthiest thing that I can get, and then I try to take the top bun off or the bottom bun off or something like that because you're eating tons of wheat.
Yeah, it's a lot of wheat, diet, a lot of gluten. Diet. Yeah, and a brief review on the gluten. Gluten is a protein that is composed of 33 amino acids. Your body has to break the bonds between each of those 33 amino acids in order to digest gluten, and that's not very easy for it to do. It's a far more complex protein structure than most other proteins we eat. And in addition to that, often it's refined, so it's very high in a glycemic index, which means it spikes blood sugar, which means it spikes insulin, which means it gets stored as fat or converted into triglycerides in our blood. But the inflammatory aspect as a result of the gluten is really a big deal, as well as the fact that wheat is a pretty good source of food for things like yeast and fungus in the body, which we want to discourage. And those buns tend to have sugar in them. You've probably
Yeah.
noticed that like really
Oh, yeah.
good tasty buns at fast food
Sure,
places tend to be a
sure.
little bit on the sweet side.
Yep.
Now, a lot of fast food places are offering, hamburgers wrapped in lettuce, for example, now, which is a great option. And if we want to be truly paleo friendly, we have to acknowledge, again, like we said in the first part, that grass-fed or organic beef or that kind of thing is going to be your best option. However, on the basic tenets of the paleo diet, that hamburger wrapped in lettuce still fits into the basic tenets. And we just want to also discourage the use of harmful fats. We've done some great shows on fats in the past where we really delved into that.
Yeah.
And we reviewed in the first part of the show that these high omega-6 oils, which I'm concerned that a lot of people do a lot of cooking with these and do a lot of salad dressing with these, but those are soybean oil, canola oil, vegetable oil. These are oils that are really good for industry because they have long shelf lives, but they're really nutritionally dead. And in fact, they can be harmful because they're inflammatory. And when they're cooked, they can convert into trans fats and also create other harmful carcinogens in some cases that age us and encourage inflammation.
Wow.
So coconut oil is a immensely popular fat these days, or I should say extra virgin unrefined coconut oil. It's a type of fat called an MCT, or medium chain triglyceride, which is a healthy saturated fat. We need healthy saturated fats for things like our cell membranes. We need it for hormone production, energy. So not all saturated fats are evil. And in fact, not all cholesterol is evil. We need cholesterol for production of hormones, again, insulating the nerves, helps us make the myelin sheath, cell membranes. The body manufactures about 1,000 milligrams on average of cholesterol per day. The USDA guidelines on cholesterol consumption, I believe, are under 300 milligrams a day, but the body makes 3 times more than that.
Wow.
And get this, the body has a what they call a negative feedback loop, so that it's designed to make less cholesterol when you eat cholesterol. So the more you eat, the body should make less. So again, it becomes this issue of what happens to the cholesterol after we eat it. And what we don't want to have happen to it is oxidation. And again, in that Phil Hess interview, we delved into that deeper. And books like Reverse Heart Disease Now by Dr. Steven Sinatra, who's a Harvard-educated MD. He's the chief of cardiology at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in New York. So pretty good name dropper. He has chapters in his books with titles like The Cholesterol Myth. And he describes how in the early 1980s, in the early part of his career, he and other cardiologists were noticing that they had patients who were having heart attacks. And half of those patients had high cholesterol and half didn't.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I was taught that this high cholesterol was just the driver of these heart attacks, but we were confused because half of our patients didn't have high cholesterol. But when they looked at other markers and things that they were testing, what they did find is that all of the patients having heart attacks had high levels of inflammation as measured by a test called C-reactive protein. So that inflammation, which is driven by those bad fats and basically driven by sugar and refined carbohydrates, as well as exposure to toxic chemicals and stress and lack of sleep, we really want to counter that. And one way we can do it in our diet is to consume more good fats, more omega-3s like flax seeds and walnuts and hemp seeds, all of which are available to Fallon Nutrition. The extra virgin coconut oil, too. Go ahead.
Where does exercise come into all this?
Oh, great. Let's do a tiny brief description of paleo exercise.
Yes.
Awesome. So there are definitely opinions about exercise within the paleo diet philosophy. And basically, the philosophy is this. One, our ancestors moved around slowly but a lot. So think of hunters and gatherers. So kind of walking around, looking for stuff, picking things up, carrying children, a lot of kind of wandering, that sort of stuff. Also, being able to crawl around on the ground and roll around and hop over things. So low intensity, but quite a bit of movement, followed by infrequent sprints. Occasionally, they had to run really, really fast. So here and there, you should be able to take off at a dead sprint. Don't have to be able to do it very long, but you should be capable of it. And the paleo philosophy advocates that you do that, 2 or 3 times a week. Thirdly, they lifted heavy things occasionally.
Right.
So, I mentioned, think of the paleo women having to carry children for long distances, maybe a couple of children, or carrying a dead carcass from where you've hunted it and killed it back to your camp.
Right.
So another part of the paleo exercise philosophy is to lift heavy things, again, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So it's really not not too crazy. You know, move around a lot, like basic walking and basic low-level activity is going to be the first part of the exercise philosophy with Paleo. Second part is going to be occasional sprints, and in real life, modern life, that can be a running sprint or a jog up a hill, or it can be on an exercise bike and say, okay, for 1 minute, I'm going to push myself really hard, and then take a break and then do it again a few minutes later.
Yeah, it's just surprising how just even a little, if you think you got to jump on a bike or an elliptical or something and go 20 minutes twice a day,
you don't necessarily have to do it.
No, I mean, I kind of got out of it for a while. Now I'm back on for the last couple of weeks, and I just start out with the elliptical in the morning, put my headphones on, but I do it every morning, and I sometimes I do it in the morning and the night, which is really good. But I'll just go and I track the distance off to the right, the digital distance markers, and each time I do it, I find that I have enough wind to go. I'll push myself another 10 points or another 20. Pretty soon you keep building that.
Exactly, and that's kind of recreating that low level, like them walking to the next camp. You're recreating that.
Walking to the next camp,
and maybe, and you might already be doing this, Steve, but you could always incorporate, every 3 or 4 minutes, go pretty hard for 30 seconds or a minute.
That's right.
And it's just within your, what's intense for you. So it's not like you have to do it at a certain pace, just what's intense for you. And that encourages release of things like growth hormone. And we know that growth hormones makes humans leaner and that it adds lean muscle mass. Also, short bursts of heavy lifting can do that.
Right.
They increase testosterone, increase growth hormone. And these are some of the trends that the exercise world is kind of converging on. What our ancestors probably didn't do is extreme long-distance running, although there are some groups in the world that do that. It's a little bit more, wear and tear on the body.
And it's largely cultural in Africa.
Right.
That's interesting. And, of course, we might point out that there are still hunters and gatherers on this earth. They've even found some that recently that were undiscovered. Yeah,
and they tend to be really, really healthy. Hunters and gatherers sometimes die from trauma. You can get killed doing certain things, but if they don't die from trauma, they tend to live very, very long, healthy lives, and they tend to be strong and fit well into their 70s and 80s. And this is without much modern medicine in many cases. And of course, Weston Price Foundation has documented a lot of this. And of course, I know we got to wrap up, Steve. But
it was a great show. Absolutely. Remember, this is the Paleo Show, and we'll probably rebroadcast this again. We really enjoy having you on, David. David Gall from O'Fallon Nutrition. And, of course, you can find them online at o'fallonnutrition.com, o'fallonnutrition.com, and also their store, which is amazing, that they just moved into on January 1st of 2012. And that is at Highway K, Mexico Road, right at Mexico Road and K, south of I-70 there, up by Slackers and Quiznos. Thank you very much for being on with us today, David.
Thank you so much, Steve. Couldn't have enjoyed it more.
Listen again each Saturday morning at 8:30 to 9, and each Sunday morning 10 to 10:30 on Westplex 100.7, and we do air it on KYRO AM 1280. Steve Casper saying bye for now. See you next week.
Thanks a lot.